Municipalities are responsible for all kinds of services that are essential to our quality of life. Whether you live in a big city, small town, or rural community, you rely on your local municipality to provide the services you depend on every day. Services such as running water, roads and bridges, local parks and recreation, and even sewer service and garbage pickup are all provided by your local municipality and are made possible because of municipal infrastructure. Unfortunately, many municipalities are experiencing challenges because of aging infrastructure.
The current state of the infrastructure in Saskatchewan, from my perspective, is deteriorating. It's aging. A lot of it has reached its maximum useful life and is in need of replacement or renewal.
I think for a long time, municipal infrastructure had underinvestment because of the cutbacks. I think we're at a state where municipal infrastructure in Saskatchewan needs a substantial amount of investment.
I do think future generations are at risk. We won't have the kind of infrastructure we have now if we don't do something to upgrade it and preserve it.
Future generations are definitely at risk based on decisions we make today. I would say we are reaping benefits of past generations. That being said, we are not creating that same future benefit for generations to come.
I think our children are not going to be too happy with us when they find out how much they have to pay to renew the assets that we have let run down and decline.
What exactly is asset management? How can asset management help municipalities manage their infrastructure?
Asset management is a plan that will assist council and staff to plan strategically for the future for current and future assets.
I look at it in terms of the equivalent of a business plan for the services that municipalities provide to their communities. So it's knowing what you have, what services you have to provide, and how you're going to provide them in the most economical way for the long term.
It's not about assets as such, it's about providing services for the community. We need to know what we've got, what it costs to run it, and at what standard.
It's really integrating a whole bunch of disciplines. It's taking people in management, finance, engineering, public works, and combining those all together and saying, okay, how do we maintain this infrastructure that we all depend on every day? How do we repair it, maintain it going forwards in a cost-effective way for future generations?
The asset management plan, of course, is charting the future, so if you're able to make those wise decisions based upon a future forecast, it should lead to long-term sustainability because it should not surprise you, and therefore you can make the necessary decisions along the way.
It is important to know what assets your municipality has. It's like knowing what your household expenses are and having those expenses listed and accounted for.
The TCA, or the PS3150, which was a tangible capital asset project, its purpose was really to create asset registers knowing what type of infrastructure we actually exists within our communities. So all that work that they did creating that asset register becomes the base of their asset management plan going forwards.
TCA was a very valuable process because it gave them the starting point saying we have 40% of our assets out of 120 communities in the province are built between 1960 and 1970, and there's a wave. And it's moving towards us.
I think asset management is a very positive movement. It's the next logical step after the TCA exercise. The tangible capital asset process was a way for us to identify our assets, to list them, to give them a value, and to start the asset management process.
Often we get caught up focusing on securing the capital costs for our infrastructure, and we forget to consider the life cycle cost of our assets. The average capital costs of an asset only make up 20% of its full life cycle costs. Operation costs, maintenance costs, and disposal costs make up the other 80% and real bulk of the expenses incurred to support municipal assets.
The full cost of an asset, now that we understand a little bit better, is a full cost accounting of that asset. So from the time that it's even looked at until the time that it's removed, it's all the costs that go into it.
So it's actually shifting from focusing on capital cost to looking at the life cycle cost of providing service. The community depends on the municipality services every day. The services from infrastructure that provide the quality of life that communities enjoy at the present time.
The most important thing is that infrastructure doesn't exist just to have infrastructure, it exists to provide services. And that's an important realization, that it's only there if we are reaping the services. So we need to determine what the services we want and then make sure that the infrastructure supports that.
But level of service then means to what you can deliver or what level of service there actually is. And that is quite a change over how we've interpreted that in the past. And that is because level of service you can describe to your ratepayers, so we can give you this for this number of dollars. Level of service can be the required level of service based on the volume of traffic is here. So that terminology is very, very useful in terms of understanding assets in general and communicating the challenges around asset management.
Every time you fill up your gas tank, you make a choice about levels of service. You can choose regular gasoline at the lowest price, or you can choose the Supreme gasoline and accept that there is a higher price for that product. Choosing and identifying levels of service in a municipality is no different.
The decision is actually trying to get the community to make a decision on what levels of service they want and what they're prepared to pay for, so that when they do, they know that that's the level of service that they're going to get for the money that they pay, and they can't expect anything more than that.
You have to decide what do you want, what are you willing to pay for, and then the consequences that are tied to what you've chosen.
When starting the asset management journey, it is important that you have support from the municipality, such as the elected officials and local administrator. From there, you can begin to collect the information needed to identify your assets and outline the levels of services you want to get out of those assets. That knowledge will help you develop long-term financial plans that will help ensure your community remains vibrant and sustainable into the future.
So I think it's really important for elected members to be stewards of their community's infrastructure. We need to have the elected members looking at getting the best return from that investment that they can, so that their communities enjoy the best services that they can from those investments.
The elected officials are the stewards of that community, so they represent that community. It's really important that they stand up and they say what the investments that we make are affordable for the future, they contribute to the overall objectives that we want as a community, and it really is important that as leaders they take that stand and they realize how important long-term financial sustainability is.
I think asset management and understanding the consequences of how we spend money, what we've got and what it costs to run it, and having good, reliable ways of communicating it is really important for the elected representatives. Otherwise, they're going to make promises they can't deliver on.
It'll be good to use that information for us is to go back to the ratepayers and say, you know, here's the decision that council made and here's why it was made. And then you have, you know, that promotes that understanding.
An asset management plan sets out what you got, what you need to do, how you're going to do it, what funds are required.
Asset management is important because we need to look at what we're going to have for our children when they come through. If we don't do some planning now, we've got a lot of assets that are going to fail on us and we're going to leave that liability for our kids to look after. We need to really understand what the cost is and keep moving forward.
The main thing about it is that if you have a limited vision where you're looking at only year by year, and there are some things out there that are going to have maintenance costs, renewal costs, and replacement costs that you can predict very accurately, would it not be better to have an extended range view into the future?
It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. It can be a high-level exercise, and it isn't that onerous to get the information, but without the information, I think that municipalities will be at a deficit to their long-term planning.
Asset management is often sidetracked by people getting too technical in preparing their asset management plans, where it really needs to be a high-level strategic document setting out where you are now and what your strategic options are for the future.
Asset management will provide us with best practices for maintenance and operation of an asset, so we can use money wisely. We can make better choices about how we maintain that asset. Asset management in my community means that we'll have a long-term plan for our infrastructure that will translate into a long-term financial plan. That will mean that we can identify what the priorities are, what we can afford and what we can't afford, what the actual full cost of an asset is.
And I guess that's the discussion we're having. Hey, it's pretty difficult for municipalities to actually continue to fund all that stuff for that amount of money. So we have to be smart about what we do and how we do it.
It takes away the annual budgeting process and replaces it with a long-term management plan. We have a better long-term idea of where we're going and how to get there.
I believe that asset management is going to give us the tools that we need to predict our long-term financing needs, and by doing that, ensure that we can remain viable and sustainable over the long term.
We've got a lot of infrastructure, a lot of services we provide. It costs a lot of money. We can't have everything. Which ones are the most important? Which ones aren't? Let's work out so that we at least look after and maintain our priority things so that we get the maximum benefit for our community.
There's a lot of excuses I hear why communities don't want to do it, for time, for money, but especially the municipalities that I've seen go through it, they get to the point and they look back and go, I don't know how I made decisions without this information.
I know that communities have limited resources to be able to do the work that's necessary, but I think each community should really look hard at making the time, creating the resources that are needed to put it in place.
Most communities are in a position of trying to attract economic development into their regions through commercial, residential, industrial. Again, when we're planning for the future, we're securing their investment in our community by ensuring that there's not going to be a rate shock. We're not artificially subsidizing any of the rates. Again, we're planning for the future and we're going to be sustainable. So again, it's securing their investment in our community.
I think just overall that I think the most important thing out of this whole process in Saskatchewan is it's ultimately for the benefit of the province.
I think everyone should just understand that it's a good thing to look into. It's a really, really valuable tool.
If you like where you're living and you appreciate everything that you've got, you want to protect that, project that forward so that the next generation can also like where they're living.
What we're doing with asset management is saying don't just live for today, live for the longer term and make sure that we've got enough to sustain services for the community.